Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 24. Today we've got Eric Bach joining us. So Eric's a fitness writer, he's a personal trainer, he's an online coach, he's a fitness business coach, and a whole bunch more stuff. And we talk about a lot of really good fitness nutrition information. He gets into a whole lot about fitness writing and gets into some of the business of his business coaching. So stick around and enjoy.
Shut up and sit down.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Fitness Devil Podcast. It's Andrew Coates, Dean Guido's here with me, but we're not important. Who's important is our guest today. We've got managed to sneak into Eric Bach's busy schedule, get him to appear. Eric's the owner of Bach Performance, and he's an online coach, fitness business coach. He's a prolific fitness writer for places like T-Nation and others. And Eric, what did I miss off that list?
Man, I think you got pretty much all of it. I do drink copious amounts of coffee, so that's important to add. That kind of fuels the machine. Yeah. That's about it, man. You guys nailed it.
Good.
I'm glad you mentioned coffee because, now we can be friends.
Exactly.
Are you a coffee drinker, Andrew?
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
I started late in life on the coffee, but I found coffee and scotch roughly about the same time, and it had been life changers.
Not together. Yeah.
Never together.
Okay.
I haven't tried that anyway. It sounds terrible. So let's get right to the good stuff. And you probably answer this one a fair bit, but how did you get started in the fitness business?
Yeah, for me, kind of going back to my story is, I was lucky to grow up with an active family. So always kind of seeing people lead by example, and then growing up playing sports. Unfortunately, I was one of the last kids to grow. So, I had, been working out, doing stuff, and even into middle school in terms of being in the gym. But around came, into high school, and everyone else was growing, and I happened to be like the smallest guy in my class. And I vividly remember when I was a sophomore in high school, I was 5'2", 103 pounds at one point, and running down the football field. And there was another guy with the ball, bigger guy in my class. And I was kind of the last guy between he and the end zone. And he had two options. He could either outrun me to the end zone, which he easily could have done. He had the angle. Or he could just, put his shoulder down and run through me. And he chose to run through me, kind of laughing, taunting his way to the end zone. And for me, that was really a turning point because, I never felt completely so embarrassed, just completely helpless at any point in my life. And at that point, I was like, oh my God, I've got to do something. Something has to change. Either it's here's that fork on the road. I can either just kind of throw in the towel, or I can really change what I'm doing and try to figure this thing out. And later that day, one of my coaches grabbed me aside, and he pulled me up to the weight room after practice, and we just started working on some different things. Before I'd kind of pulled stuff out of magazines, done that whole deal. I'd see my dad, and my dad was always into martial arts, so I saw some of the stuff he was doing, so I'd do some push-ups and whatnot. But my coach got me involved into Olympic lifting, so we started working on some clean progression, some of that stuff, and really nailed down the basics in terms of basic movement patterns. And that really gave me a spot to grow and focus on the things that truly mattered. One thing led to another. My body in natural maturation caught up to my work ethic, and kind of that fire from feeling slighted and feeling like I wasn't good enough to really had me dial in and go all in on every aspect of training. So that was really the impetus that got the ball rolling for me. And, fast forward a couple of years, I grew, became a pretty good athlete. Injuries knocked me out, when I was a freshman in college, and I jumped right into the weight room and started seeing what I could do with different team sports and trying to get involved with stuff like that. And the rest has kind of been history. I just got an early start and kind of used that burning passion and desire after, quite honestly feeling weak and pathetic, and using that fire to push me on, and just fell in love with the whole process. And here we are now, 15 years later, 16 years later, somewhere where I never thought I'd be back in the day. You know what I mean? It's crazy where that evolution begins.
Essentially a truck stick kind of fueled you.
Dude, 100%.
That's
exactly. Funny. I've displayed out on my back.
It's funny. I played college football, and I don't have that same story, but there was this one time I went for the legs, and I don't normally go for the legs that much, and I got stiff armed, totally unexpected, and it felt horrible. It's awful, it's like getting crushed by a squat. If you've ever failed a squat, it's horrible. If you just get crushed and dominated. So I'm not glad that happened, but it's kind of cool that that's what started everything.
Well, think about how far-reaching your career has been, because you're really hitting a lot of success more and more all the time. It's not sudden, and you've been working a long time at it, but the number of lives you're changing and influencing simply because some asshole ran you over in a football game. Maybe it was
have you messaged him?
Fate and destiny.
You're like, listen, man, you started this.
I have not messaged him directly. He probably wouldn't even remember at this point. But you know what? It was kind of funny just because, you kind of see where things are at that point, and there's always a hierarchy, and then you kind of see where people are later on, and kind of look back like, this was some interesting fuel in a turning of the table, so to speak.
It's funny.
Based on how life progresses.
We had this, weirdly enough, like this isn't like a joke, but one of our clients, we were talking last night at like 9, and we had 2 clients in, and we started talking about like, who was your arch nemesis in high school? So it's like the same thing, and like everyone knew their person, and it's just kind of funny because everyone kept tabs on each other. Like everyone knows, like we know where they're at. It's just kind of funny to see where people are at, and that's your arch nemesis.
Dude, I mean, come on. There's always going to be a little bit of dick measuring back and forth. Let's be real here.
It was just funny how quick it came. It was like I knew exactly the name I was going to say. I didn't even have to think about it. I was like, fuck, I held on to this for way too long.
And he probably doesn't give a shit or have any knowledge of it either.
No, probably has no fucking clue, especially in that situation. So let's kind of pivot here. You've been featured on a number of lists, kind of the who's who to follow in the fitness industry, especially this year. More or less, you've had a lot of success at a young age. What are kind of the core principles you would attribute this success, especially being so early in your career?
Yeah, honestly, in terms of, my focus is very simple in terms of my approach. I still focus on a bunch of major movement patterns. It doesn't mean that I don't know the other things. It's what is going to help my clients get the best results. And far too often, people end up looking for the next magic gimmick and, whatever's hot in terms of diet, whatever's hot in terms of training, and end up missing out on the basic core principles that they need. And as it comes to nutrition, the number one thing is going to be the quality of the food that you're eating and a caloric balance. Now, the other things do matter, but until you have those really nailed in, those aren't nearly as important. When it comes to training, well, you need your compound lifts, you need progressive overload, you need mechanical tension. If those are not taken care of, it doesn't matter what type of hypertrophy routine you follow if you don't have those basic components, as well as having a good solid movement foundation. And then enveloped with all that is going to be the consistency to continue finding a routine in terms of your diet and in terms of your training that you can do consistently and that you will do really without, missing workouts, without missing a diet. And when you're able to tie those things in the most deliverable way, keeping it simple is the message that's really gotten through to my clients. Like I said, there's really no perfect routine or no perfect diet, but the best routine, the best diet is one that you will do consistently and do for entire training cycles or dietary cycles. So I look for that, try to find something that's going to fit each one of my clients, and then notice what the trends are with what's working with my clients in the gym and online, and share the information out with everybody else. In terms of getting the information out, and growing my business, it's been just consistency, man. It's like I've just written 1 to 2 articles a week nonstop for 8 years. And eventually all that stuff just pays off. You know what I mean? It's just time in the trenches and time putting in the work. As long as you stay consistent with it, it's going to pay off. You just got to do the work.
There's so many people now with this Gary Vaynerchuk sort of mindset of, and I guess Gary's not all about like overnight success or whatever, but I think a lot of people are listening to guys like him and they're missing the message of grinding, and they're more so about trying to unlock the secret to instantaneous and overnight success. And that's just a myth. That doesn't really exist. And like all the literature I'm getting into and all the people that I talk to in our industry who have done really, really well, this is based on consistent hard work, grit, dedication, discipline, and none of this stuff happens fast.
And I was going to say, did you find over time, so like we can call this a habit of writing, but like at this point, is writing easy for you?
It is now. It's I used to just stare at the screen and just hope some form of inspiration would come on. And it's like, you know what? I just made it a habit to do the first thing I would do each and every single morning, because it was the one thing that would help me get my information out there and help me help more people. Yeah. On a personal level, in terms of writing, what it really helped me do is also clarify thought. So I was always reading and researching and trying to put things together. And then how can I apply the science into application and helping my clients? And for me, it's like writing is a way for me to organize it in my brain, get it out, and see how I can actually sequence it together. So in terms of trying to gather information that I was really learning about and researching, and then trying to find out how it can apply, It took a while to get into that habit and making sure that my brain can function that way. But then once you build that skill, you can, it becomes much easier to share that information and see how it works.
Well, I'm glad you kind of pointed that out, just because we do have a lot of young trainers listening to this as well as fitness enthusiasts, but that whole idea of building a habit, but you can stone two birds at once essentially, because you can read and get the content, and then as you're putting it out, you can tailor what you want to learn to the content you're putting out. You can basically get better while putting out content. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's a couple key points that you guys have mentioned, like just in the last couple minutes. You mentioned like the Gary Vaynerchuk and the hustle aspect of it. And, before the show, we were talking about, my recent trip to Austin. I was there for a mastermind with John Romanello, and then the event at On It Academy with Dr. John Russin. And one thing that John Romanello mentioned during the mastermind was everyone who has a successful business needs to go through what we call the noble grind period. And he mentioned, long days in the gym where he was closing the gym at 9, then going home to write until the sun almost came up and getting 3 to 4 hours per hours of sleep per night. Now, that's a pretty aggressive example, but pretty much everybody I know that's had a successful business in the fitness industry has had some sort of grind period like that. For me, it was at one point, John Goodman was one of my first coaches way back in the day in terms of building my business. And he said, if you want to be a good writer, treat writing like it's your professional job for the next 6 months. And that's what I did. I was in a transition process to a new gym, so I didn't have a full client load, and I just spent a lot of time writing and building that habit. And once my client load got heavy, I still had to write and create content. So I was getting up at 3 a.m. to do that before training clients at 5. So it's a matter of putting those pieces in. And it's amazing how many of those same principles really transfer over to the gym, because, people get hot to trot, especially, in January, and want to make that long-term change. And I'm all about, finding sustainability and finding a long-term practice, because, that's a big part of my message. I want people to be able to enjoy their lives, but also get in great shape. But there has to be that same grind period if you're trying to make a significant change in your body. It means you have to go all in on that diet for a few months to really build those habits and to get things rolling before you take those cheats, before you really relax. And once you get to that certain level of fitness, then you can start to add those things back in. But, the grind is an essential component. And only once you've, done that grind and reached that takeoff velocity can you coast for a little bit and be able to play with the variables to maintain.
I think you actually just did a really good job of answering the next question, so maybe we could add to it. So it goes to how much information about fitness and nutrition that's actually out in the online space and in our worlds. Yet I find your message actually is one of the most direct and useful and honest messages. How do you make those unsexy basics and truths stand out amid a lot of the gimmicky fitness marketing that we see?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is explaining thoroughly why these things matter. It's one thing to make a statement and say all you need to do is like squat, bench, and deadlift. It's another to say you need to work on a squat, bench, and deadlift pattern. Here's why. It may not necessarily have to be the classic exercises that we think of, but having a why between what you're explaining and giving some information and trying to educate people instead of being just aggressive on your messaging and then saying you're wrong isn't the right way to go about it. For me, it's like if I want people to understand why I'm saying something, I'm going to take the time to actually answer it. And that's why, for example, on Instagram, I'm going through, I answer all my DMs, all my comments and all that stuff because I want people to understand. It's like you can be edgy and you can try to make a point, but take the time and explain it to people how these things actually work, and just find a way to make it so it reaches home for people. And for me, I find that it's like, for example, if we're talking about a body part split, someone trying to get started in the gym, the body part split can be a perfectly fine training split. There's nothing wrong with it at all. But if people are missing workouts and then they're not end up doing any squats, any lower body training, then there's going to be an issue. So how can we explain in a way that maybe they need to migrate to a more simpler routine so they make sure that they hit all their basic movement patterns? That's what we're trying to do. So it just comes down to breaking it down and explaining why this is important, and then locking in the habits to make sure that people can build consistency, and then educating people along the way. If you take people on that journey and showing them why things matter, educate them along the way, you're going to make them more self-sufficient. And when people are self-sufficient and learn from you, that's when they grow to like you and trust your brand.
Well, I think that goes back to the point that, not that people assume, but a lot of new people assume that they know the information like we do. They went through the same path and the same vigorous consumption of information, and that's not true. And putting it in words that they won't understand is not going to help anyone. And that's essentially what you're doing is you're not dumbing it down, but you're putting it in a language that they're going to listen to and then adhere to, which is huge.
Yeah, it's if you simply take, in terms of writing, one of the biggest issues that a lot of coaches run into when they really try to get into, the publishing and getting a bigger social media following is their messaging is focused on talking to another coach. So they talk, well above what most people understand in terms of exercise and fitness. It's losing adipose tissue, not losing belly fat, which I get from an intellectual perspective. But until people know that you care and can speak their language, they really don't care what you have to offer. So instead of having your messaging be focused directly to other trainers, think about the way that, the people you want to help, how do they talk? How do they conversate? Cool. Meet them there and then lead them to a higher level of knowledge and then bring them along the way.
There's actually hits on something that I've said a lot too. We mentor sort of casually or very directly a lot of trainers in the city at the very least. And a lot of times you get people trying to write to impress their peers or to write to impress someone like yourself or we'll use Dean Somerset as a good example. He's a local guy that everybody looks up to what he's writing and doing, but they're missing the ability to connect with the end user who doesn't speak that same language. And, writing to try to impress Dean's not going to be impressed by that because Dean gets it. Dean wants to see people write to reach the end user who doesn't have all that knowledge. So I think a lot of people do that wrong.
Yeah, it's something we see all the time. I see it, in guest submissions that we get at Bach Performance, and most of the personal trainers and fitness professionals that end up working with in my mentorship business. And it's not necessarily. I think in the beginning it's just not knowing. You know what I mean? I did the same thing. I was trying to write the most impressive thing that I could. I was trying to get published and do different research things, and then sound as academic as possible as if I had something to prove. But the best way to show that that you belong is to get people results, and then help people along the way understand the message that you're trying to get through. There really are no points, for making things more complicated than they need to be. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't every now and then, throw in some big terms and explain post-activation potentiation, but explain why post-activation potentiation works. So if you can just take maybe an advanced topic that you're talking about and say, which means blah, 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 in a way that people can understand it, you're going to do a much better job of reaching your audience. So it allows you to, to kind of please your ego a little bit and show people that you're smart, but it also makes sure that you're able to reach that ideal client that you want to be able to help. And when you can provide the value to help people, like I said, that's when they trust your business, and that's when you become the person that they go to.
It seems like a good infographic idea. I was like listening to this. I'm like, that's pretty much the whole point of infographics. And I'm like, post-tension. Right?
Every episode becomes about infographics.
You could literally just put like a term on that, everyone's like, what the fuck is that? And then in the content, tell them the Coles notes.
I was writing one earlier today, so on PAP, to be honest. So
meanwhile,
it's fresh in my mind.
Meanwhile, the one that Dean just put up has an image of a person with a rounded back and a shitting dog. So.
I'm trying things. I don't know. It's one of those things, though. It's just like you got to meet people where they're at, and sometimes it's just a matter of seeing what catches on. But at the end of the day, it's the content that matters, and sometimes you have to draw them in. So going to the whole science route will kind of garner a few people, but generally people want general information because it's not that they're ignorant, it's just that they don't know.
Well, that stuff's going to work for Greg Nuckols and Brad Schoenfeld, but
so I every now and then I'll grab on a men's health, men's fitness, and see just kind of the content that they're talking about, because us trainers kind of laugh at the workouts that we see in some of those magazines and then realize hey, I would love to actually be featured in one of these magazines. That'd be pretty cool. That's the ironic part of it. I saw a poll in a recent one. I can't remember which magazine exactly, but it was what percentage of guys actually know what corrective exercise means? And that's a term that we all take for granted, right? Yeah. And it was 38% with a fairly educated audience of men's health or men's fitness readers. So I'm you take a term like that, even if people are well, what the hell do you actually mean? Yeah. And that just kind of set me back. And in trying to think of, maybe it's crazy how much knowledge there is in the fitness industry and how many smart people and well-intentioned people there are. I mean, poorly intentioned people as well, but just the fact that every single statistic that looks at our overall health is painting a pretty grim picture right now. And it just shows that we are not able to reach people as best that we could be. So I think the answer to that is simplifying the message where people truly understand it.
Well, and that's just with corrective exercise. Even in my approach with people in person is that you don't tell them they're doing corrective exercise, because if you try to go down that road, they feel like you're physio or they're getting rehab and stuff, and like really you're just fixing them. It's like Jedi mind tricks, and that's the same thing you got to do, I guess, with the content is kind of get them to understand the problem, but get it in a way that they're going to understand that, hey, it's not a scientific term. Like, you're just getting better.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes you throw up a term like that and people start labeling themselves like, oh, corrective, that means something's wrong or broken with me. And then it sets that whole victim mentality that you got to unwind. So yeah, you got to be definitely careful with the way that you approach those different things. And like I said, it's one thing to understand like the trainer perspective, the science perspective, but the application is a whole nother animal when you deal with this complex human being thing that we all are.
Well, it's funny that you talked about like complexity, and like, I guess we're going to say that Men's Health, the workout was probably pretty simplistic, but if you got asked to write a workout for them, it'd be interesting to see what you would have to kind of filter through, because they might look at one of your workouts and be like, yeah, we're going to have to dumb that down a little bit.
Well, it becomes writing for... No, go ahead, Eric, you first.
Sorry, what was that?
No, you go ahead first. I interrupted you.
Oh, sorry. I didn't quite catch what you're saying before.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'll throw it in. I actually said that I had interrupted you, so I was going to let you go, but I'll just quickly say what I was going to say. You write for T Nation and you write for your own website, and it becomes writing in the theme of the particular thing you're writing for. So if someone's writing for Men's Health versus T Nation, those are going to take on two different forms anyway. And I think in order to be able to write successfully for both, you have to write to their readers and you have to write to their style versus always being maybe true to exactly what you want to do. So how do you navigate that?
Yeah, it's anytime I create something, and this really applies to business in general. Like anytime we're talking about maybe a series of emails that are going out, a Facebook post to an article for T Nation to an article from like Ask Men or Men's Health, my perspective is like, who is the one person I'm trying to talk to? And I mean, Andrew, you and I, we've sat down and drank scotch, and my writing style is like, I hope that, we're sitting down, we're having a drink and we're just talking shop. And that's exactly how I try to approach it. So if I'm talking to a reader of Men's Health, maybe it's a 38-year-old guy with, maybe he worked out in high school and has sporadically done stuff since then, is, tired as, 2 kids and works 60 hours a week. Well, how would I talk to that person? And imagine we're just having a casual conversation, 1 or 2 drinks at a bar. That's exactly how I'd approach it. T Nation, a little bit different animal. That's a fairly aggressive audience. And you got to tailor it towards it. And you got to be a little bit more punchy and direct and call the reader out a little bit. And it just comes down to whenever you're trying to write for a publication, if that's the goal, is knowing who is that ideal client that is going to be reading that information, and just imagine you're having a conversation with them. And when you do that, when you focus on talking in a language that people are going to understand, they're going to understand that you care and you can be somebody who's going to solve their problems, and they'll continue reading your content. They're not going to turn it off and say, this guy's just trying to show me how smart he is. It kind of goes back to the old quote, is nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And your language and your words can really go a long way in terms of that when it comes to creating content.
Well, and let's even go a little bit further down, like in terms of writing valuable content. But what are your thoughts on like even professionals, and just use fitness professionals looking to write more and to improve their writing? What kind of tips, I guess, or kind of knowledge would you embark on them in terms of trying to improve their actual writing? Yeah,
well, the biggest issue that most trainers will come to me with is like, I don't know what to write about. Yeah. For starters, think of the conversations that you have with your clients and just keep a notepad on your phone. Just be like, hey, Sally asked about, why does my knee hurt when she does a lunge? Okay, maybe I could attach something that goes into, better biomechanics on a squat and dumb it down so Sally would understand it. That could be a writing topic, but just keeping tabs of all the ideas and all the questions that you get. Think about, different questions people ask. Maybe you're at a party and I'm not sure about you guys, but I can't even go out to eat with anybody without fitness questions coming up, which is great for write-offs. But these are serious questions that people have. And if you can provide the solutions to the problems, that's going to be a great way for you to have a never-ending list of content. As it pertains to actually writing itself, one, you should probably be reading, because that itself just makes you a much better writer. But make writing really the first thing that you do each day. Some people write better late, I guess. Some people write better early. But in my experience, when something is important and it's a new skill, the faster you can attack it early in the day, the better, before all of life's other inconveniences come up and you have every reason to throw in the towel and say, fuck it. So for me, like when I was trying to get better as a writer, like I said, I didn't want to get up at 3 a.m, but I got up at 3 a.m before I had to train clients, because that's the only time I know I would do it for sure. And when you do it with a distraction-free time, when it's pretty early like that, well, yeah, you drink coffee, but you can really get some pretty good shit done in a pretty short amount of time, because there are no other distractions around you. So find distraction-free time, ideally first thing in the day before other things can get in the way, and just make it a habit.
When I think at this point, and just a note on that, I can't remember where I read it, but it was that creativity is generally higher right as you wake up. So that might be a good way to, and I'm sure it comes in flows and ebbs depending on your day, but that would make sense completely. Plus the distraction-free zone maybe not 3 a.m, but even like 5. Like there's a lot less distractions at that point. Work hasn't started for most people, so
yeah, exactly.
Let's kind of turn to like our enthusiasts, or like people who are reading this stuff. And being a writer yourself and going for a bunch of publications, what are some things that they can do to filter what they're seeing? Basically, how do they navigate what's quality and what isn't in a world where there's a lot of it?
Oh, man.
Coming from a guy who's writing at these places, so it ends up being valuable because you actually write for a lot.
The answer is read what Eric Bach writes.
Other than read what...
Yeah. For starters, I would look at... when you look at the beginning of the articles in the lead, like what is going to be delivered? Good writing now, I mean, everyone's got a different writing style, of course, but you should know pretty quickly what you're getting yourself into in terms of what you're going to have as a benefit for this article. Is it just going off about research studies in the first paragraph, or is it actually saying, hey, in this article, I'm going to teach you how to do this, this, and this, follow along, and then we're on the way. As it comes to reading and consuming information, it's no good to consume information if you do not take action behind it. So I would say look for one specific problem that you are trying to solve, and maybe go an inch wide and a mile deep on that topic for a couple of weeks and truly learn to understand it. I would say looking at some research, if that is your thing, in terms of nutrition stuff, the Alan Aragon research review is absolutely fantastic. Brett Contreras has a fantastic research review when it comes to the training aspect of it. If you're looking to go that route, otherwise, try to see what authors really resonate with what you're trying to accomplish. Basically, if there's somebody who, kind of fits the ideal of what you want to accomplish. One great example is Brian Cron, who works with, guys generally 30s to 45 and does an absolutely fantastic job of integrating lifestyle advice into sage training advice. He's a guy with decades under his belt in terms of the gym, but also understands the context of how to build muscle and really apply it to a solid population. So I would say, for starters, really look for an author that's going to resonate with you and their messaging. If it's too good to be true, it probably is. Yep. And if you're interested in the research aspect, I would say, do a little bit of background information on maybe the methods that are being talked about, and see if they actually make sense to apply to your training. And I know that's somewhat advanced, but it is important to form your own opinions, because although a dogmatic approach in pushing a hard line in any given avenue, whether it's training, whether it's nutrition, is popular and it does drive clicks. And unfortunately, driving clicks is important in terms of creating content and fitness. You have to see both sides of the coin. What works perfectly in the lab will not often work in a training environment, and what works in a training environment can't be vindicated by what happens in the lab. So you do need a good blend of science and practice, and how to understand how these could fit maybe into the bigger picture in terms of what you're capable of doing as a person.
Well, I think even that whole message of being skeptical, like I think a lot of people just assume the best, which is fine, But there's a lot of shit information out there, and asking those questions or doing a little bit more research, because you can kind of rely on people like us to put out good information. But again, you have to be responsible for yourself and your own learning journey. And that comes with being skeptical, because if you don't ask those questions, how are you supposed to kind of have your own filter and create your own kind of path? And that's exactly what you're talking about. So that's good.
Yeah, definitely. Part of that journey is, I've seen some different articles of people doing call outs of, don't follow these people or this person, and cleanses are bad. And I totally get that perspective. But then I also remember back to when I was first consuming fitness information, was I was trying to follow every bodybuilder's workout and stuff like that, not knowing that there's going to be a pretty significant difference between someone who's been training for 30 years and has a pretty solid, pharmaceutical regimen and 14-year-old Eric. Yeah. But the thing is, good writing can hook you in regardless of whether the information is good, and that can lead you down a path that's going to allow you to form your own opinions and your own education. But having that critical perspective and being able to disseminate, how different information applies to different people is really important.
Yeah, that's great. I wanted to also ask you about something else that we mentioned at the very beginning, and it's about your business coaching. So obviously there's a ton of coaching in the fitness industry. Clients are hiring coaches. Coaches hire their own trainers to take care of them because they're busy with their needs. And now that ever, we're seeing coaches hiring business development coaches. So that's a big part of your work. In addition to all your fitness work, could you explain the value of having such a coach and what you do yourself in your business with it, and why you decided to start working as a professional business coach?
Yeah. So, as it applies to coaching, the number one thing that it provides, and this is regardless of whether they're talking, business, we're talking fitness, is it gives you accountability and implementation. Yeah. As it comes to my business, and I'll circle back over to this, as it comes to me, long story short, Andrew, I'm not sure if we talked about this story in the past, but a few years ago when I was working in Denver, I had a fraudulent accountant who stole $50,000 from my business. Oh, and this was when I was at a new gym, and I had still a solid clientele, good online business, but had more or less taken my money that was supposed to go to the IRS and pocketed it into an offshore account. He's now in prison. Money's all good now, but long story short, I had to pay that money back plus interest plus penalties, and was out that $50,000. So I was in a position where I need to completely revolutionize the way that I did my business. I knew the classic trading dollars for hours method was not sustainable if I was going to be able to continue to build my business the way that I wanted. So I had to go back to the drawing board. I'm like, what can I do with my business, with my skill set that's going to allow me to make more money, help more clients, and do so in an ethical way without, slanging some multi-level marketing supplement, right? So what I did was, what we call the hybrid model. And the hybrid model was, instead of taking clients in just a session by session type path, I would, bring clients in for we'd focus on maybe a 12-week block. And what we do is it would be a set price point, and it would be very high touch in the beginning. So maybe the first month, clients are coming in a couple days per week, but they're also getting workouts on the side from me. So they're continuing to learn what to do and becoming more self-sufficient. The second month, a little bit less hands-on with me. They have a pretty good idea of what they should be doing. They have self-guided workouts via an application that we use, and in nutrition planning, we're still checking in, still having a lot of conversation. The third and final month, well, then we dial things back a little bit. We have fewer sessions in the gym. More of the workload is pushed onto them, make sure that they're getting done. As a coach, you're still applying guidance. You're still applying the accountability that they need. And then at the end, if they want to continue training in person, great. Here's the typical package. If not, hey, here's this online training thing. You've learned how to train safely and effectively. You're still in the area. You can come back and check in. And this really just allowed me to scale, work with a lot of clients, and allowed me to build up my online business to a greater extent, and continue to grow from there. Not long after this happened, I was getting just a lot of reach outs and questions from other coaches and other trainers. I did some different speaking engagements on the topic, and coaches started asking me for coaching and advice. And I'm like, you know what? Well, sure, I'll start, giving you guys some guidance and advice on how exactly, I built this up. And that's kind of how it came. It wasn't anything that I'd planned, 5 years ago. It was just kind of a natural evolution of, I found a way to make this thing that worked, and people wanted to find out how this thing worked. So I started helping people make this thing work for them. And that's kind of how the business was born. And yeah, like I said, that's really how the business really took off in the beginning, and now it's starting to scale up from there. In terms of like our messaging and really what we help our clients with is, we've all taken courses, on different topics, and I've worked through courses, I've worked with coaches personally on the business aspect. And for me, it was always better to have somebody there who was there and pushing me. In sports, I always wanted to be coached hard. You don't have to sugarcoat anything for me. If I'm not getting the job done, get on my ass and tell me to pick it up. And in terms of business coaching, it's really easy for trainers to get into this industry because they love the fitness aspect and they want to help people. And for that reason, a lot of times coaches forget that they are running a business and they start discounting everything that they're doing. They are just trying to do everything to help people, and that's totally great. But if you devalue your services, you can also devalue the way that your clients see your business. And for example, if you're giving things away, for free, people tend not to work on things that are free. And if you can work on developing your business and building the habits that you need, just like you need the habits in the weight room, you can begin to really make a business that can reach and help a lot more people.
Oh, that actually makes a ton of sense. And we could sort of look at a different way in how most of the trainers who get a start in the industry start out in commercial gyms. And that's a story that we've heard with Luka Hocevar is a really good example of that. He spent time at LA Fitness after he'd come over from Slovenia. And anyone who wants to know that, just get into Luka's stuff. It's a really cool story. So a lot of trainers are, spending a lot of time for not necessarily a lot of money to learn the business and learn these skills. If you're giving away that much of your money to these big corporations, you could certainly, starting out as you're learning, you could probably pay a business coach. It would probably work out to be kind of the same thing as you're growing and learn it more directly as you build your own business instead of building a business for someone else. And if you want to think about it in those terms, someone might see the value in hiring someone like yourself. And it's Daniel Friedman, right? Who's your partner in this?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So we hadn't said his name. We probably should throw him out there too. So.
Yeah. So, in terms of kind of what you mentioned with coaching in general, it's, I started on some of the commercial aspect as well in a more of a commercial gym, and there's definitely some value in there because you get to see a lot of people. You start to learn the business aspect of it, but once you get to a certain point, as you mentioned, they take so much money off of what you're doing, and pretty soon you're trapped. I believe the term would be golden handcuffs. You probably got a pretty good thing going on, but you feel like if you leave, you're screwed. If you do anything else, you're screwed. You're working 60 hours a week and you can't really dial back because you're trading dollars for hours. Cutting back to 40 means you're losing, a good chunk of your income pretty quickly. So I think it becomes a matter of, making sure that you're a good trainer first and foremost, and then deciding what exactly you want to do and who you want to be able to focus on. And once you start to know who you want to help most in terms of your business, that's when it kind of circles back to our writing discussion before, and imagine writing and trying to help that one person. And if you keep your focus on helping that one person in terms of your online business, you're going to go a lot further than trying to spread shot and be everywhere.
Well, and that's the one thing I like to point out, just because we get questions at this point, and it's like they're seeing all these successful online coaches, and they think that that's where the Holy Grail is, that's where the money's at. But really, it comes down to, we talked about the grind, but being good at your job first. And
yes,
we talk about conferences, and we've talked about conference, the KC conference, and this and that, and those are great for networking. But if you're at a certain level, there's something we said for going to things that will make you better. Go to seminars that are going to make you good at your craft. You can worry about all those big picture things after you have an actual business. Actually, after you're an expert. Not to say you shouldn't do them, but there is something to be said for being good first.
Yeah, actually, you mentioned that conference thing, and we get a lot of questions about going to that because we mentioned a lot. Most of our guests have. A lot of them, I met there, Jay Ashman, Patrick Umphrey. That's how I know you. You, me, Carter Good, who's been on our podcast, and Robbie Farlow are sitting down in a hotel room having a scotch. Robbie's our next guest next week, and he's a good friend of yours. So a lot of these trainers are hearing this going, oh, I got to go to this. And we're getting questions about it. But you're brand new to the industry. You have a ton to learn. This is something that'll be there for you when you're ready for it to benefit from the networking. There's nothing that you're going to learn from those presentations you can't pull from those people's writings, the stuff you can buy from their info products or YouTube videos. And you're spending a lot of money to travel. This is something bigger. So brand new trainers shouldn't be thinking about this sort of thing.
Not that they shouldn't do it. It's just, you're talking about even your business coaching. It's get good at your job. That helps.
Yeah, exactly. one way that we like to think about this is it's just building your business is just like building muscle, right? If you do not have the foundational strength, foundational movement capacity, and a caloric surplus, all the advanced methods, occlusion training, focusing on meal timing, all these other factors do not matter. And in terms of, building a business is going to be good online, like pretty much people, occasionally someone's going to be very good online and they don't really have much experience, in the gym because their personality just makes up for it and their ability to reach people. But unless you have developed that skill and know how to work with a bunch of different people and know how to go through a sales process and know how to really help and reach people, you're not going to be successful. It's like focusing on occlusion training when you bench 75 pounds. It's like, it's not going to do shit for you to build your arms. Like, no, like you have to get good at the basics and the foundation. And as many coaches know that in terms of, a good number of coaches know that stuff when it comes to fitness, the same philosophy really does apply to business. Make sure the foundational skills are there so you have that good bedrock. And once that's built up, you can reach a much higher peak in terms of what you're able to do in terms of building your business in the future. But, don't put the cart before the horse and try to reach the top of the pyramid before you build the base.
Well, you show up to, let's just say you show up to this conference, you're a brand new trainer, you think you learned everything in school, and you're going to have a conversation with, let's just say, Alan Aragon. But, you're not ready for that conversation. And that's good that you want to learn and everything, but, take your moment and be ready for it. And I mean, there's just something to be said for, like you said, foundational. And even with training and business, jumping right into business when you know nothing about business. I mean, there's something to be said for outliers, but there's probably a better process.
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy just how much the industry has changed in a pretty short period of time. Even when I got started with my online stuff, something that just kind of happened. It was like, well, you're going on a trip. How about I write your workouts for you? It wasn't something that I'd really planned out. I was just focused on trying to get my clients results in the gym. And then this thing just kind of started happening and it kind of grew from there, just kind of like it did for business. It's like, all the young trainers out there don't leave now and just try to become a social media superstar and try to start a massive online business because you worked out for 8 years and have a college degree. Because frankly, there's a huge missing component based on what you're doing. And, like I said, very few people can do it successfully and ethically. And, sometimes it takes a little bit of time to mature into that role, and that's okay. Just get good in the gym and really focus on helping people, and everything else will fall into place. And take it from there.
Well, and you're mentioning your place, let's talk about you again. How have you balanced writing, client coaching, business coaching, being a trainer? How have you come to kind of manage all that and be successful?
And have a life.
Quite frankly, I don't think there is such. Yeah. Quite frankly, I don't think there is really such thing as balance if you want to achieve something that most people don't. Yeah. I believe greatness is inherently unbalanced, and you have to know that you're making sacrifices in other areas, and you have to be ready and willing to make those sacrifices if that's something that you truly want. And that's a pretty tough question that most people don't want to answer. Yeah. They just want it all. And so first you've kind of got to recognize that, but it's you can't go out till 3 a.m. and stay at 7% body fat and do a show and eat pizza all the time and be natty, bro. It's not going to work, right? You can't make all those things. So for me, it's, there's been a lot of growth in the last year and a half and a lot of struggles. And for me, it's been, trying to find what are my highest leverage activities? Yeah. What are some of the things that I enjoy? And for me, some of the highest leverage activities are still creating content. I enjoy it. And then setting up some restrictions and limits in terms of what I am able to do in terms of the business. So, built up more of a team, different things are being outsourced, and, putting myself in a position where I can help lead and continue to grow with our core message and still provide all the value that's needed in the different parts. So, that means, I've had to dial back into writing a little bit, had to dial back in some of the fitness stuff to make room for the business coaching. But, it's about trying to find what are your highest leverage activities, and then understand that there are going to be trade-offs that you'll have to make. You can strive for balance, but just understand that balance is likely not ever going to get there if you're trying to do something that's extraordinary. Something to aim for, but it's probably not going to happen.
You can't have it all. Well, I mean, you could, but like you said, you're probably still in the grind phase. You haven't described anything where you're on a yacht just having personal training clients go via online, drinking margaritas and doing nothing but relaxing. Like you're still going.
Well, you look at the people who are really successful in the fitness industry who are doing this sort of thing on the high end. Like you look at a guy like Bedros Keuilian, and that guy, everything is scheduled and regimented with him. And I don't think he ever stopped the grind.
Yeah.
I'm sure he takes time to sit on the yacht, but that boy is a grinder, and he's got an incredible work ethic.
What? Eric has a yacht?
Oh.
Eric, you have a yacht?
Bedros.
No, I don't. But no, I mean, you're spot on. And, I have the flexibility to do some of those things, now if I want. But for the most part, am I working the 4-hour work week? No, like I'm still getting in and crushing that stuff day after day and trying to build these things up. But a lot of coaches get into the online industry thinking that they can, do this and snap like a YouTube video every couple days, work for 3 hours and, make things pop off and go crazy. Like I said, very, very, very few people are able to do so. Most are going to have to continue to grind, continue to push. I believe I heard this analogy originally from Bedros Keuilian, and the numbers might be off, but if the takeoff speed for a plane is 150 miles an hour, what happens if you're at 149? Nothing. And what that it relates to is people don't realize how hard you have to push, and they might say, "Oh, I'm working hard, and it's not happening." Well, you probably still have to go a little bit harder. It's like the hard gainer who says, "I'm eating a lot. Well, you know what? A lot might be a lot, but a lot isn't enough. And, that's very cut and dry and it's blunt, but it's also the truth. Obviously I'm always, down to work as smart as possible, but sometimes you just have to do more work. Regardless of the situation that you're in it, and you've got to make it work one or the other, whether it means you have to make some strategic changes or you have to push harder.
Well, and even, was it the productivity handbook?
Productivity project.
One of the things was there's a difference between working 25 hours and 90 hours, and generally 25 to 30 hours is a sweet spot. But in terms of, he's like, sometimes you just need to fucking work more. There's the ideal, but then if you have a bunch of clients that just popped up, you're not just going to turn your back on them because it's ideal to work this ideal work week. And it's a matter of when you need to do work. Sometimes you just need to grind.
Well, Dean's just
sometimes you just got to do more work. It's it's just that simple. Yeah, it's not sexy, but that's the results can be.
If you're the type of personality who's buying into this whole 4-hour work week bullshit, and that is a big crock of bullshit.
It was a different time when he did it.
Is just, if you are that kind of mindset, you're probably not going to go anywhere anyway. So you got to dispense with that and be willing to do some work. So we just referenced 2 different books there. So we always ask everybody, Eric, what's a great book that you'd recommend to everybody that's really had an impact on you? And seeing as you're running out of time, I'll lump it in with, where can our listeners find you and follow you? Yeah. So,
first off for the book, I would look at The Obstacle is a Way by Ryan Holiday. Really anything by Ryan Holiday is gold. He is wise beyond his years. The Obstacle is a Way is a great book because, we all face different obstacles, whether they are true obstacles or they're manifested, really with our thoughts and in our minds. And your ability to leverage that and use that pain or that discomfort to do something greater is what's going to help you achieve something new. For me, that's the discomfort of not feeling comfortable with who I was and getting physically humiliated helped me build my body, which led to my fitness business. Getting robbed of $50,000. Well, I had to reinvent what I was doing in terms of my business and learn something completely brand new. And that just paved its way into a fitness business consulting business as well.
That's actually one of my favorite books too.
Yeah, they're fantastic. I just got done rereading Ego is the Enemy last night. So I reread those once or twice a year because they really keep me grounded and focused on what needs to be completed. And in terms of finding out more, well, wonderful. So you guys can find me at bachperformance.com. I'm hitting the old Instagram pretty hard, as the 3 of us have talked about, and that handles at Bach Performance. And then on the business end, we just launched our new website, Bach Business Coaching. There's a free gift for you to kind of give the overall view of the hybrid fitness model if you are interested in checking that out. So yeah, check out the websites, bachperformance.com or bachbusinesscoaching.com. Otherwise, I'm hitting the Instagram pretty hard. I like to give some information in the morning, an occasional training video, and then some, sarcasm, kind of calling some stuff out a little bit later in the day.
A little bit of alcohol and coffee.
Yeah, talk a little alcohol and coffee and talk, some vegans and stuff like that. And, let's have some fun.
Yeah, guys, I can't stress this enough. Like, follow Eric. I've been following Eric now for a little while. I've cut your writing on T Nation was probably the first place I noticed. And all of a sudden, one day, just out of nowhere, I get a Facebook friend request. And that was like, Eric Bach's adding me to Facebook? That's kind of cool. So anyway, so I had you on there. And then, like you mentioned, got to hang out and meet in Kansas City and then met a bunch of your friends who are really great people. But like I said, your message is really clear. It's direct. It speaks to the end user. It's full of incredible information. You've got a very upbeat and positive attitude. So what you're putting out there is actually one of my favorite styles, and you're one of my favorite people for putting out those messages. So for the people who've been following me specifically, guys, I want you guys to follow Eric. Okay. He's been fantastic. And I just love soaking up what he's doing. So you'll get a lot out of that. And if you're one of Eric's people finding this on his feed, and hopefully you guys have liked our podcast, well, maybe you'll check out one other episode in our library of stuff. Actually, hang around next week because we'll have his buddy Robbie Farlow, who's going to be just absolute fire. And
it's like follows on Instagram. I need 10K for the swipe up feature.
And Dean will sell his soul at Guido Power 1, is it?
I don't know.
Yeah. So for the swipe up function. So Eric, thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. It's been great chatting. And I can't remember, are you going to be in KC in May? I think maybe you said you weren't.
I have not decided yet. I've got an absolutely insane travel schedule up until that point. So I might just say, let's tack on one more. Why the hell not? I'll have all the airline miles that I could ever need. So I'm gonna see if I can swing it.
Sure.
I just got to see. Maybe I'll bring my wife, and that'll keep everything else good. You know what I mean?
No, then you'll be tame.
He's pretty
No,
tame
I won't.
All right.
Awesome. Andrew, Dean, thank you guys very much. I appreciate the time.
Thank you, my friend. And thanks everybody for tuning in.
Shut up and sit down.